802, chapter 14. So what happened yesterday? Yesterday we had they came back and they told over what was going on, and we talked about the state of mind of the Meraglim, of the spies, and why they did what they did. Well, let's take a look and see. I touched on this yesterday. The most incredible thing, you've got 10 people coming back, and they are causing the most incredible mass hysteria. It's unbelievable what people can do with other people's emotions. It really is something extraordinary. And everybody here knows as well as I do, there's like a mob mentality. So the minute it starts, it takes on a power of its own. It just takes on a life of its own, and it can't really be stopped either. We'll have a look. Let's have a look and see. Verse number 1. So everybody starts crying. Everyone's shouting. And they started to cry. Now, when is this Laila Ahu? What are we talking about? Unfortunately, right? It's the Meraglim, the spies came back on the 8th of Av. And they in the afternoon, they told over their story. Everybody starts to cry. Night has already fallen, which means it's now the night of Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. And that's when they start to cry. Everybody, I hope you understand the significance of the 9th of Av. The 9th of Av, of course, is the day that the 2 temples were destroyed. It's the day that the Spanish Inquisition began, the expulsion from Spain. I mean, lots of terrible, terrible things happened on the 9th of Av. Interestingly enough, the First World War broke out on the 9th of Av, which, if anybody knows the European history, you'll know that the First World War, of course, was a precursor to the Second World War. And ultimately to the Holocaust and the decimation. It's a bad day for Jews, isn't it? 9th of Av is a terrible day for Jews. 9th of Av is the concentrated version of everything which has been bad for the Jewish people over throughout history. It's bad news. Where does it come from? It originates from here. They came back on the 9th of Av and they started to cry. The Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God says to them, Atem bechisem bechia shel chinam, you cried for no reason, so I'll give you a reason to cry on the 9th of Av. You'll have a reason to cry, which means that they're all crying over here because they've just been led, they've been led up this path of hysteria. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that, if this is the way that you're going to behave, then it's almost as if, what a waste of tears. Here, I'll give you a reason for you to cry. And that's where all of these terrible calamities keep appearing over and over again on the 9th of Av and working their ways back into the 9th of Av. And it's something, it's something really a cause of great despair. The interesting thing is that the 9th of Av, Emetz Hashem, when the Mashiach comes, it should come very soon. But when the Mashiach comes, then the 9th of Av will turn into a festival. It will turn into a Yom Tov. And that's something that we have to look forward to, right? Which means that within all of this darkness, within all the terrible, the terrible calamities of the 9th of Av and everything that it means, there's also a little spark of something positive over there. There's a little spark of within that darkness. That's where the dawn is going to break, and it will turn into a day where we're going to celebrate it, much like a Yom Tov, which means that we're going to have, special davening that we'll do, special tefillot that we're going to say, and there'll be, we'll have to light candles, and we'll have a special Suda food, of course, because we're Jewish. There's that famous phrase which seems to resonate all the time, which is that Jewish. Well, how does a Jewish year look? Someone tried to kill us, we won. Let's eat. That's pretty much the Jewish year. Here, so verse number 2. Vayiloinu al Moshe v'al Aaron kol bnei Yisrael. So now what's going on now? We got a little bit of fermenting of a rebellion over here, because obviously the Jewish people, they're having a little bit of difficulty now working out why they had to be where they are. So they're coming to the conclusion that Moshe and Aaron must be responsible for what's going on, and therefore they're going to start, Vayilonu means that they're not rebelling, but they're very unhappy. Right, like that, they're muttering to themselves that this Moshe and Aaron, this combination of the two of them, it's not good. And they said to they say to Moshe and to Aaron, it would have been better that we would have died in Egypt, or even to have died over here in the desert. What makes sense over here that we should go into the land of Israel and we'll all be killed by the sword, and our wives and our children will be taken as whatchamacallit? What do you call these things? Slaves or something. Yeah, slaves. Haloi toiv lanu shuv mitzrayim. Let's just go back to Egypt. It's quite astonishing. It really is. Which means that you hear what they're saying? Even if right now they're free, and they're saying they would prefer to go back to Egypt than to risk going into the land of Israel, because they've just been told that the land of Israel is a place that they're not going to be able to conquer. That's pretty. I don't know if you realize just how significant that is. What do you mean to go back into Egypt? Do what? What, become slaves again? We'll see. So they say to themselves, this is it, come on, let's go back to Egypt. Done. Right? And then it says something very strange. Vayipol Moshe v'Aaron al pneihem, and Moshe and Aaron, what do? They fall down onto the floor. Here it says that they fell on their faces, right? Lifnei kol kaladas b'nei Yisrael, in front of everybody. What does that mean? I don't understand what kind of a reaction is that. You can picture this in your minds, right? The Jewish people are all hustling around and jostling around, and they're very, very upset, right? And really, we would say that what they're really looking for, what they really need, is a little bit of strong leadership right now, right? I would imagine what we really need is for Moshe to get up and say, guys, stop it, enough. In the hope of trying to, draw some kind of a control around everybody, that they should just think straight. To give them a moment where Moshe can get up and say, listen, I don't understand you people, I really don't. What you think God can't take you into the land of Egypt? They try, right? But what does Moshe and Aaron, what do they do? Which are the ones that are being murmured about? They're the ones that people are muttering against. What do? They fall on their faces. Why? Because in the olden days, when a person would prostrate themselves, when a person would fall on, lay out flat on the ground, what are they saying? They're saying that that's it. They resign. It's as if Moshe and Aaron are saying to the Jewish people, it's not. We are doing God's will. If you don't recognize the fact that we're doing God's will, then we don't have anything to do over here. We're not leading you because we want to be the leaders.
Do they know at this point the people that Yoshua and Caleb are addressing? Are they aware that this land is destined for them?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, they know that. But
they know that 100%. They know that it was promised to Avram Avinu, right? And it was passed over to Yitzhak and to Yaakov, and they know that it's the promised land, and they know that they're supposed to be there. But they've got a little problem, right? That there are giants in there, and there are powerful nations in there, and they just feel that they can't. It's not right. Right now, it's not the correct time to go in.
It seems like if they buy into that, if they know that, and it's understood, and yet they have their doubts. It's almost like, they're, is Hashem part of the deal? They're getting the land.
Good.
Is he coming?
Yeah.
Is he going to really be with us?
Good.
And it's like maybe they can't put the two together yet.
There is definitely a problem between intellectual understanding and emotional understanding. Like everybody always says, right? The biggest gap that exists is the gap between the heart and the brain. That's the longest distance. Intellectually, they know perfectly well that the land is a promised land. They know that. And they know perfectly well that God took them out of Egypt, and that God can do whatever he wants, and that God can take them into the land of Israel, and there's nothing for them to be concerned with. They know that.
It's like they literally want God to come down and hold their hand in there.
Yeah.
They should have full faith in God after walking around the land of Egypt.
You would imagine, right? What's the problem? No, the problem is that it's not just an intellectual decision, it's an emotional decision as well. And the emotional decision over here is something which is their emotions they're being played upon right now. And they're having their emotions manipulated. I would imagine it was probably that emotions are being manipulated because they were probably in a rather delicate state to begin with, right? A lot of uncertainty over here. They're in the desert, but they're going to the land of Israel. What's waiting for them? What's going to be? What's it going to be like? There's a saying: better the devil you know than the devil you don't, right? So right now, the life in the desert. Okay, it has its moments for sure, but at least this is something they know. It's something they're familiar with. They're going to start something new. Transition is a very difficult moment. The most dangerous moment for everybody is when they make the transition from one state into another state, right? One reality into another reality. Yeah.
The Miraglim, they're very powerful people though. Like I mean, the spies that went in there, they're very powerful, like spiritually. You know, I bet like they were the figureheads of each tribe. So how what's like the base of the fear? Like were they really questioning? Oh, is God really with us? Like.
It depends which approach you take. We spoke about it yesterday that but the idea is that according to the Zohar they didn't want to. These 10 spies did not want to go into the land of Israel. They'd already made that decision before they actually went in. They'd made the decision they were going to come back with a report that was going to reflect negatively in order to stop the entry into the land of Israel. There are two different approaches as to why. One of them we spoke about yesterday was that they didn't want to lose their positions of responsibility. The other one is the opposite, that they wanted Moshe to remain, they wanted to remain in this bubble of spirituality with Moshe living in the desert, in the clouds of glory, eating the manna and drinking the water, right? And not to have to go into the land of Israel. They didn't want to deal with that. But whichever way you look at it, they'd already made a decision they were going to come back with a negative report. 10 out of 12.
Well, like they talked to each other about it before, or like how
there was it says that the first day that they went in, they already had some kind of an agreement between them. That's what the Medrash says, that they had kind of an agreement between them that they were going to come back with a negative report. But Yoshua bin Nun v'Kalev ben Yefunah min ha'Torah es ha'aretz kol bigdeihem. What did Yoshua and Kalev do? Right, Yoshua and Kalev, of course, are they're the goodies. Right, they're the good guys. They're coming back and they're saying that the land of Israel is great. They tore their clothing. What does tearing your clothing mean?
When you have sadness, I mean, it's a
mourning, right? It's a sign of mourning, which means that they know. Kalev and Yoshua realize that a red line has been crossed over here, which is going to have the most incredible ramifications. They don't know how it's going to unfold. They just know that what's going on right now is something which is going to be the tremendous source of pain to the Jewish people, and they tear their clothing in signs of mourning. And they get up and they say, we were there too. We also went through the land of Israel. We also saw it. And that land is ha'aretz toiva ha'aretz ma'oid ma'oid. Very, very good. I saw once a beautiful idea. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of the Fathers, which says that a person should be have a ma'oid ma'oid shafel ruach. A person should be very, very humble. That Yoshua and Kalev are trying to tell the Jewish people, right now, the way that you're behaving, you're being a little, you're being a little egotistical over here, right? You're being a little thinking only of yourselves. If you were a little bit more humble, you'd be able to understand that the land is very good. Very, very good. Not just good, not just very good, very, very good. Right? The play on the words. Tova oretz ma'oid ma'oid, and have a ma'oid ma'oid shfaruach. To be very, very humble. Once a person is humble, they're able to see things in a different way, right? The more arrogant we are, the less capable we are of seeing what's really true, what's really out there. So listen to what they're saying. They're saying what we're all thinking, right? If God has brought us to this land, it's a land flowing with milk and honey, which we spoke about yesterday. Don't start trying to rebel against God. But what do you think you're doing? And then they use a very strange phrase. They say, "Et ha'am ha'aretz," the people who are living in the land, ki lachmeinu heim, they are our bread. What does that mean? You got to work hard in order to make bread, right? You've got to plant it, and you've got to harvest it, and you've got to take care of it, and then you've got to separate it from the chaff. That's a whole enormous process, seemingly natural, that puts bread on our table, right? What they're telling the Jewish people is the same way that you've got bread, the same way that you can make bread, the same way that there's a process that will bring bread and put it onto your table, so too HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to take care of all of this. We'll have to go. We'll go into the land of Israel. We'll go in with our army. We'll fight against the people. We'll conquer them, and then we'll take over the land. That's exactly what God said we were supposed to do. In the same way that nobody says, you know what, we shouldn't plant this field because it's too much work. It's too much of an obstacle to get the wheat to grow and to make the bread. So too, it's the same thing over here. You have to be as scared of these people as you are of a loaf of bread. Yeah, that's what he's saying.
I thought it was like you'll eat them for breakfast.
Right, unless you're on diet, you don't have to be concerned about it. Loaves of bread don't have to be a source of concern to you, right?
When did the man stop? When they went into Israel?
Yeah. He said, you people, you're not real. God is with us. What do you imagine? I've mentioned this on many occasions, but you got to keep repeating it. What are they telling everybody? What do you imagine? God's not going to take care of us? Did you honestly imagine in your minds that God can conquer the Egyptian nation, which was the most mighty nation, the most mighty empire in the world? That God can split the sea, that God can feed you, that God can give you water, that God can protect you, but he can't get you into the land of Israel? Do you really believe that? What do you see in the land of Israel that's so complicated for God? And what did they want to do? They wanted to stone them. They wanted to stone them to death. Why? Because when you're angry, you're not rational anymore. Everybody knows that. When a person loses, but they lose their logical approach. They lose their rationality, and they do all kinds of crazy things. We all know that when we're angry, right? We do ridiculous things. And they know that what they're listening to is the truth. They know that. Your hip shot, it's very important to understand this. It really is. Nobody here is trying to say that it's not true. No one here is saying that they're liars. Even the spies are not saying that they're lying. Right? The 10 spies are not saying that Kalev and Yoshua are lying. You know why? Because they don't have to. Because the people are in such a state now that what can you do? They're not going to listen. They're not going to listen to anything that's going to make any sense. They're only going to listen to what they want to listen to.
Rabbi Lauffer, I'm just curious, is this the 8, they're using free will to influence this assembly?
The 10.
Yes.
Sorry,
the 10.
Yeah.
And in so doing, they're also they also recognize that this is given to them, this land. I don't understand. I guess it's just really hard for me to how they can influence.
Because the emphasis is like this: they are preying on the insecurities of the people.
But what about all the miracles? I mean, what happens?
So here, there's a very important idea over here. It's found inside of the early authorities about miracles. There's a problem with miracles. The problem with miracles is that the influence of the miracle wears off after a time. Okay. And when you're living in an environment that is completely miraculous, that becomes your natural environment, which means it has very little impact. I don't know if anybody here has ever been in a life-threatening situation, maybe in a like a car crash or something. But you know that the first time you go past that place after it happened, you relive the whole experience. You come out and you're shivering and shaking and you fear and whatever it is, right? And then the next time it's a little bit less, and a couple of weeks later, if you're passing that place regularly, then you just come out in goosebumps. But it's okay. And 6 months down the line, it's like, oh, you know what? And I haven't thought about this for ages, but this is where I had my accident. a person walked out of that accident completely without a scrape, nothing, and it's a miracle. It's definitely a miracle. But the influence of that miracle, it wears off. So we're all sitting over here and we're all saying, and it's not fair. You should know that. Nobody here is being fair. But we're saying to ourselves, wow, these guys are not for real. God took them out of Egypt, God split the sea, God got rid of the Egyptian army, God gives them food, God gives them drink, God gives them protection. What do these people think they're doing? And I'm telling you, to my intense embarrassment, that if we would have been there, we would have been just as much a part of everybody else as they all were. We would not have reacted any differently to everybody else. I'm telling you.
Also, they had the added thing of there were slaves in Egypt and treated terribly for ages before they were took out. Maybe they thought they'd go Israel and be put into slavery again and treated bad for years before they were took out. Maybe.
Which means that slave mentality is still being carted around with them, right? They've been slaves for 210 years and now they're coming out, and it's not something that it's going to take a while to get rid of that. Maybe. And maybe that's the reason why, we're better off going back to Egypt, where we know exactly what slavery is like, rather than ending up in a place where we're going to die and our wives and children are going to be enslaved, and that's terrible, right? Of course there's no logical, rational reason why they should think the way that they're thinking. But since when has logic and rationality had anything to do with our emotions? For sure, 100%. But the whole of the Jewish people is going to be held accountable. We're going to see. Here, bad news, right? Up until now, all we've had is the narrative of what's taken place with the spies coming in and everything that's happened. Now we're going to get God's reaction. Verse number 11. Vayomer Hashem Moshe ad ana yenatsuni ha'am hazeh. For how much? I don't understand. That's what God is saying. How much longer are they going to do this to me for? How long are they going to push me for? Look at this. Isn't it interesting? God thinks just like you do. God is saying, look at this. How long will they not have faith in me despite all the signs that I performed in their midst? Good question, no? I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to wipe them out. And I'm going to start up with you. I'm going to take you, Moshe. I'm going to wipe out everybody else. And I'm going to take you, Moshe Rabbeinu, and I'm going to re-establish the Jewish nation through you. Okay? Now, we all know that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to react and say this is not a great idea, right? The question is, why not? Moshe Rabbeinu knows perfectly well that when it comes to doing the will of God, it's really only him, it really is. The only one that doesn't question, the only one that doesn't have any doubts, the only one who is prepared to give up everything in order to fulfill the will of God, that's Moshe. So when God comes along and he says, wow, sure. So I don't know, how much longer can we do this? This is ridiculous. After everything I've done, there's such a bunch of ingrates. You know what? Let's just get rid of them and let's start up again with you instead. So we know that Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership qualities kick in immediately, and he says no, and I'm a part of them and they're a part of me. We know that, right? But the real question over here is, why not? Why doesn't Moshe sit down and say, you know what, maybe you're right? So there's a fascinating idea over here. That the Medrash says like this, that Moshe turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he says that a chair with 3 legs can't stay up. How will a chair with 1 leg stay up? What's he asking? If the Jewish people are established on Avram, Yitzchak and Yaakov, on Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, and we flunk out, and you want to start up again with me, well, how on earth is this going to work with only 1 leg? You can a chair will stay up with 3 legs, especially when they're put in the shape of a triangle. That's nice and sturdy, right? But a chair with 1 leg, it's not a great idea. It really isn't. So the question over here is hold on a second. But what is Moshe Rabbeinu suggesting? Surely he's not suggesting that if you start up with him, that's negating Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, is it? So we need to understand a little something over here about titles. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are called the Avot. Moshe Rabbeinu is not an Av. He's not a father. Moshe is Moshe Rabbeinu. He's our teacher. There's a fundamental difference between being a teacher and being a father. What is the difference between the two? That a father is somebody who's a father to his son, regardless of what the son does. He's always the father. Right? Unconditional love, which means that even when the son is doing things that the son shouldn't be doing, and even when the son is behaving in a way that's contrary to what the father wants the son to do, the love is always there. A teacher, on the other hand, well, with a teacher, there's a certain sense of obligation and responsibility, no? If you want me to teach you, you've got to follow my path. If you don't want to follow my path, then I'm not your teacher. What Moshe is saying is like this, that you're going to establish a Jewish nation on me, but I'm a Rabbeinu. I'm a Rav. I'm a teacher, which means that the only people who are going to belong to the Jewish nation are those who follow exactly what I tell them to do. But if you don't follow exactly what I'm saying to do, then you won't be inside the Jewish nation, which means that what will happen to the Jews, there will be a very, very small, very concentrated group of people who are following the words of Moshe Rabbeinu to the nth degree, and anybody who veers away from that is going to be outside. That's it, finish. You're not part of it. You can't, hold on a second, you can't sustain a nation like that. A nation has to be sustained through everybody. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, those are the avot, those are the fathers. That's unconditional acceptance. Moshe, on the other hand, in a certain sense, Moshe is conditional acceptance. Says Moshe, that's not good. You want the Jewish nation to continue, you want the Jewish nation to be the Jewish nation that it needs to become, it's got to be inclusive, not exclusive. There's an incredible, the Rambam says, Maimonides says, in the halachas to do with fast days, not the regular fast days that appear during the year, but fast days that are introduced inside of individual communities when there's some kind of a calamity. So the Rambam says that everybody's got to come and they've all got to pray together, they've all got to fast together. It says the Rambam, the tzaddikim, and if there are no Rishonim, if there are no evil people davening over there, wicked people davening over there together with the tzaddikim, with the righteous people, then that's not a tzibur, that's not a community. It's an incredible idea, it really is. A community is comprised of all different kinds of people, all different kinds of colors, all different kinds of shapes, and all different kinds of flavors. You put them all together and then you have a community. That's exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's exactly what Moshe is telling HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can't establish a nation on me, because my nation will be some kind of an exclusive club that it'll be very difficult to get into and it'll be very easy to get thrown out of. And that's no good. You hear? So what does Moshe say? Right? Moshe works on HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a different way. He's going to say like this, what will the neighbors say? If you wipe out the Jewish people, ואומרו אל יושב הארץ הזו שמעו כי אתה השם בקרב העם הזה אשר עין בעין נראה אתה השם וענך עומד עליהם ובעמוד ענן אתה הולך לפניהם יום ועוד אש ולילה ואמרת את העם הזה כאיש אחד ואומרו הגויים אשר שמעו שמעך לאמור מבלתי יכולת השם להביא את העם הזה אל הארץ אשר נשבע להם וישחטם במדבר. Whoa. Hear what he says to God. He says to God, you know what everyone's going to say? Everybody's going to say, you were strong enough to get the Jewish people out of Egypt, and you were strong enough to take them through the desert, but you just weren't strong enough to get them into the land of Israel, so you wiped them out instead. You know what this is? In simple words, it's called a Chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name. Moshe is telling God that if God goes ahead with his plan to wipe out the Jewish people, it will cause the most tremendous desecration of God's name in the physical world. It's an incredible thing, no? What's Pshat? So I don't know if you're familiar with the term Chilul Hashem.
I've heard it a few times.
Right? Desecration of God's name. When somebody does something that they shouldn't have done, and they're obviously Jewish, then that's called a Chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name. Hold on a second. The word Chilul comes from the word Chalal, which means a vacuum. What is so terrible about a Chilul Hashem? It means that momentarily God has been removed from the environment. God's not there. There's like a vacuum. It's godless, as it were. That's a terrible, terrible thing, because the minute there's a vacuum, the minute there's a space over there, it can be filled up with things that are no longer God. And that's not good. For sure it's not good. Moshe says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, wiping out the Jewish people, you understand what he's telling God? He's telling God like this: you're right. According to the strict attribute of din, of justice, you should really get rid of these people. You really should. They're not good. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. But you know why you shouldn't get rid of them? Because by getting rid of them, by doing what is absolutely strictly correct, you're going to cause a Chilul Hashem. It's almost as if he's like cornered God into a place where God's got no other alternative now but to let them carry on living. Right? Because, of course, if God says they deserve to die, then they deserve to die. There's no doubt about that. But on the other hand, what Moshe is suggesting is that by doing that, by doing what's absolutely right, then something terrible will come out of that. What we're going to see over here, interestingly enough, is a compromise.
But how does Moshe have the...
Oh, because Moshe, what's the chat? Again, you've got God looking at it from God's perspective, and you've got Moshe looking from human perspective. And what you have now is something absolutely fascinating. You've got the human perspective is a perspective which is going to win out. Why? Because here in this imperfect physical world that we live in, that's the perception that we have. Which means that it's got to be factored into the equation, the anomalies and things not being the way that they're supposed to be. And you know what? And what the neighbors are going to say, all of that has to be factored in. But on the other hand, God feels an intense need to let the Jewish people know that they deserve to die for what they've done, which means that we've got a balance over here, right? God is saying, here, this is the verdict. This is what I say. And Moshe is saying, you notice at no point does Moshe Rabbeinu turn around to God and say, you're wrong. He simply says that it will bring the wrong message down to the people that are left behind, that's all.
Doesn't God know that?
He does, but he wants the Jewish people to know that what's called aliba de emes, right? According to the truth, they deserve to be killed for what they've just done. You know what it's like? It's like a person in court, right? The judge will say that really this person deserves, 10 years in jail, but due to mitigating circumstances, I'm going to give him community service, or I'm going to give him 2 years in jail, or I'm going to give him, a suspended sentence, whatever it is. What does that mean, mitigating circumstances? Either he needs to go to jail for 10 years or he doesn't. You're a judge, aren't you? You're supposed to give out justice, aren't you? And if the law says that for doing whatever this person did, he needs to go to jail for 10 years, so what on earth are mitigating circumstances going to have anything to do with it? Oh, which means what? What are you doing? You're no longer looking at this simply from the perception of din, of justice. You're looking at it, the whole picture, with all the imperfections as well. Right? But it's important for the person in the dock to hear that he's really supposed to get 10 years for what he just did. He really is. But because of reasons X, Y, and Z, so you're not going to get 10 years. You're only going to get 2 years, whatever it is. That's exactly what's going on over here. God wants the Jewish people to know that he's decreed upon them death, that they deserve to die for what they've just done. What Moshe has done is that Moshe has introduced mitigating circumstances. He's not trying, again, a lawyer will know when he's up there trying to defend his client who's guilty, he's not going to try to say that this person didn't do what he did. In many cases, it's not shaykh, it's not applicable to do that, because it's clear that he did do what he did. All you've got to try to do now is try to explain why he did what he did in order to get some kind of a leeway somewhere. Moshe Rabbeinu was not trying to say the Jewish people were not guilty and were not deserving of the decree that God wanted to decree upon them, but rather, he's just saying that if you do that, it will end up making a bigger chilul Hashem than has already been made, and that would be terrible.
Hashem knows that, though.
Yeah, for sure. Again, so what's the pshat? He wants the Jewish people to know absolutely that they've lost their right to their lives. They've lost it. Which means that the life that's going to be given to them now is something which is being granted to them out of the goodness of God's heart, as it were. You don't deserve this, but I'm giving it to you anyway. We'll see. Right now, we'll see. It's a compromise over here, which means that they're given a decree that they're all going to die in the desert, but they're given a space of time within which they can live. Yigdal na koyach Hashem kasher dibata leimo. Hashem erech apayim v'rav chesed noise ovam v'fosha v'nakeh lo yinakeh pokei davoin avois abanim v'shelishim v'aribayim. This is something which we came across already. This kind of lashon we came across by the golden calf, with the 13 attributes, God's 13 attributes. Some of them are missing over here. The ones that are to do with the goodness of the land are missing because they turned their backs on the land. So it's kind of difficult. You can't really tap into this dimension of the what are called the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim, the 13 attributes of God's mercy. Some of them can't be tapped into because they're going to work against them. You know, that ridiculous joke about the kid who kills his parents and then in court he asks for mercy because he's an orphan. It doesn't work. Slach no la'avoin ha'am hazeh kegoydel chasdecha. Forgive them for what they've done. This is what Moshe is saying. Why? Kegoydel chasdecha, because of the greatness of your mercy. You hear? Listen, Rabbi, say, listen carefully. Don't forgive them because they deserve to be forgiven. That's not what he's saying. Right? What's he saying? Forgive them because the enormity of your mercy, you are all merciful. Which means that you can forgive them. Said, God, you know what? Okay, I've forgiven them according to your words. But now we'll take a look and see at the repercussions over here. V'ulam chayani v'yimalei chvoid Hashem es kol ha'aretz ki kol ha'anashim ha'ro'im es kvoidi v'es oisoisa asher asisi b'mitzrayim u'v'midbar v'yinasu oisi zeh eser pe'omim v'lo yishamu b'koili. They've tested me 10 times already and they didn't listen to me. This is what God is saying. If they're going to see the land that I promised to their forefathers, they're not going to see it. And who is going to go in? Kalev was allowed to go into the land of Israel. Yoshua was also allowed to go into the land of Israel. Which means that all of the men in that generation are going to die out. The Meraglim, the 10 spies, are going to be killed immediately. And Kalev and Yoshua, the 2 good spies, those are the ones that are going to be allowed into the land of Israel.
How come he only brings Caleb there, but my servant?
Because Yoshua has already been given the protection from, from Moshe Rabbeinu with the Yud, right? And we know that Yoshua wasn't a part of all of this. It's interesting, it says by Kalev, it says like this, that all the way through the trip, through the journey through the land of Israel with the spying, so they knew perfectly well that Yoshua wasn't going to cooperate with them. They knew that. But Kalev, they were never sure about by Kalev, because Kalev kept himself to himself and he didn't say what his opinions were. And that's how he had that moment when maybe he was able to get everybody quiet when he stood up and he started telling everybody, what did this Ben Amram do for us, in the hope that maybe they would listen to what he's got. It didn't work, right? But at that point he shows that he really doesn't agree with what the others have come up with. There's a concept of you can have people who show their colors straight away, and you know that this is somebody who does not agree with your ideology, somebody who doesn't agree with what you believe in. And sometimes you've got people who you don't know. You think maybe they do because they hang around with you, But it transpires, in the end, that they don't really believe in what it is that you believe in. Kalev now is being given a reward over here to show his connection to God. V'amaleki v'aknaini yoshev be'emek mocha pnusu lachem hamidbar derech yamsus. Said HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the first thing that's going to happen over here is what? That you're going to have to leave this area that right now they're standing at the border of the land of Israel. God says, that's it. You got to turn away from here. You're going to go back into the desert because you can't go in. Because like they said, you've got the Amalekim over there. You've got the Knainim over there. They're just waiting for you to come in. And if you're not ready to go in, then you can't go in. Right? Here, let's keep going. Vayidab Hashem Moshe v'Aaron le'mor. Ad mosai le'eda ra zois asher hema melinim alai es klunois b'nei Yisrael asher hema melinim alai shamati. How much longer is this going to go on for? Emor aleim, go and tell them. Chai ani nu'um Hashem. Im lo ikan shedibatem ba'oznai. Kein aseh lachem. This is what's going to happen. Here's the decree. Bamidbar hazeh yiplu pigreichem v'chol pkudeichem l'chol misparechem miben esim shana v'mala asher chalinoisem alai. Any man in between the ages of 20 and 60 right now is going to die in the desert. You're not going in. Right? Im atem tavoy la'aretz asher nasasi ez yodi l'shaken etzchem bo ki im Kalev ben Yefune v'Yoshua ben Nun. The only two people from that age group who are going in are going to be Kalev and Yoshua. No one else. Men. V'tapchem asher amatim levaz yiyeh ve'veisi oisam v'yodu es ha'aretz asher ma'astem bo. U'figreichem atem yiplu b'midbar hazeh. Uveneichem yuroim b'midbar abayim shana v'nasu ez nuseichem. Here we go. It's going to be for 40 years. You're going to be traveling through the desert for 40 years. Ad toim pigreichem b'midbar. B'mispar hayamim asher tartem es ha'aretz abayim yoim l'shana tisu es avonoseichem abayim shana. Why 40 years? Because you're going to have 1 year for every day that the spies went through the land of Israel. I mentioned the other day, retroactively, this has been a big chesed from God because really it should take much longer to go through the land of Israel. God had them go through in 40 days because they're going to end up walking around the desert for 40 years. V'yedatem es tnuasi. Here, I just want to go back over something we mentioned yesterday because I think it's something very, very important. The emes is like this, right? That really, if it's 1 year for every day that they were not beseder, right? One year for every day that they didn't do what they were supposed to do, then surely it needs to be the last day that they came back, no?
Yeah.
They went through for 40 days and they came back and they said the land is no good. When they came back and said the land is no good, that's when the sin happened. If that's when the sin happened, then surely they should just get 1 year wandering around in the desert. But it's not so, like I mentioned yesterday. The 40 days were included in the calculation. Why? Because they already went in with the wrong, everything was wrong to begin with. Which is they went in with a mind to do what it is that they wanted to do. Therefore, retroactively, the 40 days are going to be counted in, and there's going to be 1 year for each day. But there's something more over here as well. The number 40 is very, very significant. The number 40 always represents a concept as something which is non-returnable. You pass through something which you can't go back now. Anytime when you're going to come across a 40, the first 40 we come across is that the flood, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, even though the water was on the land for a whole year, but the rain itself rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and that turned the earth became something else altogether. And something irreversible has taken place. We've got other 40 days and 40 here. Moshe Rabbeinu goes up Har Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights, and from there the Torah is brought down into the world. All different kinds of 40s. The number 40 represents something which is irreversible. Nothing can be done to put things back to how they were. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to the Jewish people, 40 years. You're going to travel through the desert for 40 years, and you are going to be something else completely different by the end of it. Hi, so what's the pshat? Let's try to work this out. There's something very subtle over here.
First, I'll get rid of all the meraglim.
Got it. The meraglim themselves we'll talk about afterwards, right? But right now he's talking about the people, right? Let's work it out.
I meant the people.
from the ages of 20 to 60, those are the people that are included in the decree. It says like this, that somebody who dies younger than 60, so there's a concern that that person has gone through something called karet. He's been excised. Excision. That their soul has been removed and that they've got no connection to God anymore. Something very, very, very terrible.
Where is
God,
Where is this?
huh?
Where is this?
Chorus.
I mean, where
Chorus.
is it written?
Chorus appears all the time in the Chumash. We see it all over the place. For the first time we see it, for example, is by the halachas of Pesach, that somebody who eats bread on Pesach is given chorus. The chorus for certain sins that people do. There are 3 different kinds of chorus. The first kind of karet is when somebody dies without having children. The second side of karet is when somebody dies young. The third side of karet is this idea of somebody could live here in this world to 120 and they can have lots of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, but their soul has no connection to God. In the spiritual realms, it's completely detached. What is considered to be the age, the cut-off age of Korah, somebody who dies under the age of 60? Kodesh Baruch Hu is saying like this. Who was held accountable? Anybody between the ages of 20 and 60. Right? Which means that in order to let these people live beyond the decree of karet, which is not applicable to them, what they've done over here doesn't have karet attached to it. It means that God has to allow the youngest people 40 years to live in the desert to reach the age of 60. Right? Once you reach the age of 60, then that's it. Then they're going to die, which means that the 40 years, it means basically it's going to be split up according to the ages of the people. Somebody who is 60 years old today is going to die today. Someone who's 59 will live another year. Someone who's 58 will live another year. Someone who's 20 will live 40 years in the desert, but by the time that 40-year period is over, that whole block of people will no longer be around. Now, why 20 and 60? What's the big deal? Because 20 and 60 are the ages that people have to go into the army. That's where you have to serve in the army. Which means that who's being held accountable over here? The people that didn't want to go into fight. You hear? The people who are younger than 20, they're not being held responsible because they weren't going to be drafted into the army anyway. And the people who are over 60 are not going to be held accountable because they weren't going to be drafted into the army either. The only people who are going to be held accountable are those people who were supposed to fight and they didn't go into fight. So I'll tell you something absolutely fascinating.
Why 60? I mean,
why the age of
20,
60?
I understand going into the army and all that. But what's the 60 coming?
The age of 60 was considered, at that point, you were still considered capable of serving. Right? Again, people lived a little bit longer in those days, right? So I think the truth is, I think here in Israel, it's interesting, here in Israel, for people who are in combat positions, right? Officers in the army in combat, I think they retire when they're 45 years old, which is far too early. People retire on a full pension at 45 years old. They twiddle their thumbs and they don't know what to do with themselves. It's not an easy thing to do.
The gap from 20 to 60 is a 40-year period as well.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Absolutely, right? From the age of 20, you become completely accountable for your actions. Right? That's why you go into the army when you're 20. You've got a 40-year period over there where you are supposed to be actively involved in helping out in the protection of the Jewish people. They weren't prepared to do it. So God says, fine, you don't want to fight. Stay here in the desert, in that little bubble of spirituality, and don't fight. But you're not going in. There's the most incredible moment when the Jewish people finally do go into the land of Israel. The first city that they come across, there's a very famous thing over here. They came to Jericho, right, Jericho, which if you know your geography, so the first large city that you come into when you come in from the bottom of the land of Israel is the city of Jericho. It's very important geographically. It's very important tactically. It was very important because it controlled different directions. And they come to Jericho, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them they're not allowed to take any spoils. They can't take anything, right? And they do this incredible thing. Jericho, they go around the walls, and the walls come tumbling down, right? And they have this miraculous battle over here. And unbeknownst, somebody took something. They don't know it though. Somebody took some of the spoils over there, right? They stole some stuff. And they go on to the next city. The next city is a city called Ai. In Ai, 36 people die in the war. Jews. Machlokes in the Gemara, it's not sure whether 36 people or whether it was one person who was so important that he was like 36. You know that the Sanhedrin was comprised of 71 people. So somebody who has the weight of 36 people is like he's so spiritually important. He's like the majority of the Sanhedrin. The Jewish people come to Yoshua and they say the strangest thing. They're coming into the conquest of the land of Israel, right? And they're going into fight. And they come to Yoshua and they say, hey, we're happy to fight. We're happy to go to war for all of this, but you never said anyone was going to die. Isn't that weird? Doesn't that sound strange to you? You're going to the army. You're going to conquer a land. You're fighting against these warlike, barbaric tribes that are living over there. And you come and you say, hey, we're happy to fight, but, get killed? No, we don't do that. We don't do the get killed thing. So what's Pshat? Pshat is very simple. That they understood that they're going into the land of Israel. God's going to take care of everything. They understood that. They knew that, right? Which means that God is taking care of what's going on. Then you don't have to be scared about the fact that you're going to get killed in war, because that shouldn't happen. The only time you're going to get killed is when you don't do what God tells you to do something and you don't do it. That's not the smartest thing you've ever done, right? That's why, who's being zapped over here? Who's being held accountable? The people who didn't want to go into the land of Israel, who were going to have to fight to go into the land of Israel. So, the Chafetz Chaim, he used to say like this, be careful for what you daven for, because you might get it. Right? These people didn't want to go into fight in the land of Israel. So God says, fine, so don't go into the land of Israel, don't fight, just stay here and die instead. It's what's known as midah keneged midah, measure for measure. Right? Tit for tat. You weren't prepared to go into fight, so fine, you'll stay here, you won't go anywhere. And you'll die over here in the desert instead.
Sounds like a fine plan to me.
Huh?
Sounds like a fine plan to me.
It says that every year, on the 9th of Av, on the night of the 9th of Av, the Jewish people would dig graves for themselves, these people over here, and they would lie down to go to sleep. And whoever didn't get up in the morning was dead. And over the space of 40 years, 600,000 people died. And it says that on the last year, the 40th year, they did the same thing. And everybody woke up. So they decided, see, the greatness of the Jewish people, they decided that they must have made a mistake with the calculation. So the next night they went and they did it again. And they did it again, and they did it again, until they got to the 15th of Av. On the 15th of Av, there's no mistaking that the 15th of Av, in the middle of the month, when the moon is at its greatest, there's no mistaking that you're past the 9th of Av, that's for sure. And at that point, they made a little festive day, a little Yom Tov, to realize that the decree was now finally over. Nice. That was the repercussions of the actions over here. Mitzvah Hashem, tomorrow, we'll talk about what happened to the Meraglim themselves. And these 10 spies, what happened to them, that's also something very, really, really very awful. Terrible.
We still don't know who's running the show here.
Who's running the show?
I mean,
there is no obvious leader over here. It's mob rule, it really is. Interestingly enough, it's got a lot to do with human nature. But when you've got a mob out of control, then they don't normally have a leader. Mob doesn't have a leader. When the leader takes over, when somebody is strong enough to start trying to make some kind of an order, at that point the mob loses its potency as mob rule, and then it becomes a more cohesive unit. But up until then, anyone can do whatever they want. Good. We're going to stop over here. Mitzvah Hashem. Tomorrow, there's more.